Hey there, and welcome to Conversations in Color. My name is Adam Akala, and I'm excited to invite you into the conversation tonight with Tim Nordine, President of the Eau Claire Area School District Board, and Erica Zur and Dr. Marquel Johnson, also both members of the Eau Claire School District Board. Our school district has been in the national spotlight lately, garnering some attention from Fox News, Breitbart, other national news sources, because of some of the things that have been going on in this school board race. A reminder that the election is on April 5th, so if you're watching this on Thursday, just a couple of days away. Make sure that you're registered to vote, make sure that you know your polling place, and have a plan to vote on Tuesday. We're not going to tell you how to vote here at Conversations in Color, but we're going to encourage you to use your voice at the ballot box. Conversations in Color is founded on three main pillars. Honesty, we're not going to shy away from honest conversations. Humility, we're understanding that we don't have all of the answers and that we're imperfect in that way. And humanity, the understanding that every single human has worth, and every single human that we bring on this show is human at their core. And we respect that. We want to thank our sponsors, Shift Cycler and Coffee Bar, for this wonderful venue and the wonderful chai tea latte that I just finished, Pablo Center at the Confluence, Converge Radio, and the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. Now, I invite you into the conversation. I'm here tonight with Tim Nordine, School Board President of the Eau Claire Area School District, Marquel Johnson, and Erica Zur, who are both current school board members. Really excited to chat tonight. I don't know that excited is necessarily the right word, because it's not necessarily an exciting time that we're getting together to chat about. But since Tim and Marquel, you guys are both on the ballot coming up here in a week, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourselves and kind of introducing yourselves for our audience that might not know you yet?
Sure. Excuse me. So I'm a former high school science teacher. I taught high school science at a real small district in Iowa right after graduating from Iowa State University, and realized as I was teaching there that as much as I could do as a teacher, some of the policy that I was facing and that our teachers and students were facing was kind of holding us back. So I made the decision to return to school myself. Moved out to New Jersey and did a PhD in education with a focus on policy. Then moved to Eau Claire in 2015 with my wife and family following her career. Here I've mainly been a stay-at-home parent for my two kids, but I've also been still involved in education. Worked with Erica on a grant writing team to bring a new school into the Mondovi School District within the district.
My alma mater. Go Buffaloes.
That's right. And but also being involved with just other district committees, working with some private educational outfits as a physics teacher in that, and just being involved in education. Then I joined the school board in 2019 in my first year there, and I've been serving in that way ever since. Excellent. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Marquel Johnson. I have been an Eau Claire resident for 15 years. Majority of my time here, I am a university professor. I think probably professionally one of the things I'm most proud about that I've done. Over the last 13 years, I direct and operate a physical activity program for children and adults with disabilities from Eau Claire and the surrounding community. Prior to here, I worked on my PhD out in Oregon at Oregon State University, Corvallis, Oregon, go Beavs. And then prior to that, I am originally from the South, Montgomery, Alabama. So been fortunate enough to live in about 33 of the 50 states as well. And so seen a lot, and and here I am in Eau Claire. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. And Erica, you're not on the ballot next week, but could you just share a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I'm Erica Zur. I'm originally from Northeast South Dakota. I moved here, 13 years ago now. My husband transferred here with Menards and is now with UPS. And I am an early childhood teacher by trade. That's what I did here. That's how I got my start in education here. Now work for CISA 10, which is a large education service agency. We serve 27 school districts all throughout this region. And I work specifically in college and career readiness. So I help school districts Mondovi, Bloomer. I help all sorts of different school districts with their academic and career planning, and I work specifically with business and industry to sort of help shape students' futures and get them involved in things they're interested in. So,
excellent. I mean, impressive resumes, impressive backgrounds that you're bringing to the table here, and all parents. You all have kids. Like, I think that that's another important thing to understand.
Every current school board member for Eau Claire Area School District has children that are attending Eau Claire schools. I think that's a great thing for our board, that every one of us does.
Yeah, I mean, you really can have an experience on the ground through your kids. So things that have been going on with the school district and the school board specifically. We've had a lot of things going on in the last couple of weeks, but the temperature on the school board has kind of been turned up, and the meetings have been turned up for a while now. Back during the height of the COVID pandemic, when we were talking masks and vaccinations and things, there were a lot of meetings that had to be very skillfully handled because there were people that were upset about the policies to even attend the meetings where you had to wear a mask. And I believe a meeting was canceled or the public comment was cut short because people simply weren't following those rules. Fast forward now to a couple weeks ago, we're starting to dial up the temperature even more. We had training in the Eau Claire Area School District that was presented by a UWEC professor specializing in LGBTQ and women's studies. That really upset some educators and some parents in the district. This led to a racist email sent to you, Dr. Johnson, suggesting that the school district should recognize Thank a White Person Day. It actually led to threats against the board and against your family, Tim.
Yes, that's correct. So last Monday, the 21st, I received an email to my school board email account through the district's contact site. You can go to the district webpage and click on any board member's name and send them an email directly through our contact form. That email did threaten to kill me, then to shoot up your next board meeting, which I received it on a Monday. Our board meeting was that night. And then went on to say, I'll kill you and your entire family. Which obviously was a huge shock, and we had to respond quickly because, as sad as it is to say, Adam, we live in a world right now where it's all too possible to imagine a mass shooting event at something like a public board meeting. We see them at schools, we see them, weekly almost across the United States, and so it was imminent that it was important that we immediately responded because we have to take it seriously until we know that a threat is not credible.
Yeah, and seriously to the point that Eau Claire Police Department was involved. Yep. There was police presence at the board meeting. Yep. They are conducting an investigation.
That's correct. Yeah, they responded immediately. They came to the district office. I actually was at home at that time with my wife and one of my two kids. They came inside. I went to the district office to be, separate from them mm-hmm. In case there was immediate danger. And then the police responded and joined us at the district office and got all the information that they needed for their investigation. They do know who it is that did it. The case is at the district attorney, and they're moving forward with next steps even as we speak. So, I can't discuss many more mm-hmm. specifics right now, but I'm thankful for our police officers, the way that they handled it. They handled it quickly. They knew that there was a potential threat to the community, so they were ready to respond both by investigating the crime, but also being there and present at the meeting to help with any potential disturbance that was there. But they were amazing, and that's why we're so thankful for our partners in the police office.
Definitely. And I mean, through all of this, there's just a lot going on, and we haven't had any super negative results at the current moment, which is great. How are you all doing?
Well, I think the hardest part about it all is that it's not why I'm on a school board. It's not to. This was never a part of the reason. You know, you never seek out this type of heated conversation. You don't expect that you get the worst of humanity just for trying to improve the lives of kids. And I think the one thing that I know about all of us is that we're here because we know education, and we value education, and we want to give our district the best. You know, that's why we're here. And, you know, I think there'll always be room for conversations about how we do that, but we're just people who are trying to do really good things, and this was never. It robs us of our work. It robs us of our abilities to be those leaders, and I think that's the really unfortunate part. It was very challenging to sit through the school board meeting on Monday and with a head that was in the game. You know, it was hard to go and feel like I'm here to do the work that I was elected to do. When you're worried about those things, it was hard to leave my family. You know, it was hard to walk out the door with them knowing that that was what we were walking into. So I think it's just unfortunate, and it's not who any of us are. It's not why we're on a school board. So, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah. And Marquel, you're the only one that received that one particular email.
In the 2 years that I've been on the school board, I distinctively get emails targeted towards me with a racial overlay that comes with it, and yeah, is it somewhat troublesome? I think. For me, it's troublesome because everything that I've done professionally in this community has had positive impacts, especially on the families and students and people with disabilities that I've served. And so to experience the consistent racial undertones of this community it's a little bit unfortunate. To say that it's not, to expect it though, you know, I think you can expect it comes with the territory. I think I somewhat anticipated when putting myself out there to perform a civic duty like being on the school board. I guess I did not expect it to be to this particular degree, but like I said, it comes with the territory. Overall, you know, one of the benefits, and I'm not sure I would have always commented about benefits from being from the South, but specifically being from Montgomery, Alabama. The level of racism that I've experienced here personally and professionally still has not risen to the degree of the racism that I've experienced as an adolescent and during undergrad back in Alabama. But life's still young for me, even though I'm in my 40s. And given, as you indicated earlier, kind of how tensions are at an all-time high, you know, I would not put it past in the near future to continue to receive stepped-up attempts at and more aggressive attempts at deliberate racism towards me, especially given where, I think our district has been put in the national limelight. I'm pretty sure a lot of outsiders, not from the community, as well as insiders in the community, will be a little bit more intentional about making sure that I know who they are and how they feel about me. But, you know, I would, for the viewers, the cautionary tale about all of this, I think for the viewers out there is, I am comfortable with who I am. I'm also well-equipped and well-prepared to handle threats that come towards me. However, though, we have a significant group of individuals in our BIPOC community who don't have that same sense of confidence, that same sense of willingness to embrace confrontation. And they experience racism just like I'm experiencing on a daily basis, and it has very traumatic consequences on them. And for me, I think serving on the school board and being involved in the community, it is making an attempt to try to provide a different perspective of kind of what our majority white community, how they view or how they perceive BIPOC people, right? And so, I think those of us who are part of the BIPOC community, we've been intentional about seeking out a critical mass of people who we know are supportive and that we can count on in times like these. But there are also individuals in the BIPOC community that don't have those same resources. So the community overall should just be very conscientious that, not all BIPOC people endure and can just take continuous racism on a daily basis and just be well. And that's really kind of one of the things that, like I said, I have a collective folder of racist emails as being a school board member. Comes with the territory. That one that I received though, that was really, it's probably top 5, and that's why I gave it social media attention. So
I think that each of us realize, if we didn't before we joined the board, you realize shortly after that, being an elected official, being somebody in the public, and having to make hard decisions oftentimes, you can't make a decision that's going to make everybody happy. And that part of the job of being on the school board is getting a nasty email from time to time, an upset email. Today I met for an hour and 40 minutes with someone that wanted to talk more about a decision that we recently made and share some of their frustrations, share the ways that they thought we could have done better, how we might have made a better decision in their view. I think we all immediately accept that. And I think we also probably recognize that we're individuals in a large but also still smaller community, right? Dr. Johnson knows a different set of people than I do, so maybe they're going to reach out to him when they have an issue that needs to come up with the school board. Or Erica, I always feel like so many of our staff members, and so many people from just being around and involved in the community. I don't always get those same emails, right? The people reach out oftentimes to the person that they're comfortable with or that they've met or that has talked with them before.
And that's kind of the point of having community members as our elected officials, is that you can talk to them.
But I will say that, I obviously have not experienced, a lifetime of racism. And I will say that reading that email was the single most racist thing that I have ever personally encountered. And I know that you share with us, and we see oftentimes how you get different pieces of mail, and the overtones are clearly there. But it really impacts me as well to realize how directly this is happening and how much work we have to do as a community to come through this, right? That we can talk about systems and we can talk about policies that impact people, but we're also experiencing it on an individual level, and it is in that experience that really is something that we have to be aware of, and we have to do what we can together, because it doesn't, you experience it, I know, in a different way than we do. And we talk about this, well, why did you get this email? Well, you and I share a lot of commonalities in terms of our family, in terms of our, education, things like that. But, people seeing right now that, there's one major difference. And I sometimes struggle for how do we get through this and how do we work together? But it does demonstrate how much work we have to do and why we have to be committed to this work in terms of, just the interpersonals and the way that we communicate. Any school board, any person is going to make a decision that you don't like, and that's part of that, as you said. But this is a level too far. And, obviously, threats are a level too far, but, I don't know. Maybe I've lost the thread a little bit here, but, we're in this together, and it's just unacceptable that this is something that you're having to deal with in a way that the others of us don't.
But you know, it's interesting because I think it's isn't it the long-standing naivete of the idea, especially of public education, though, that through the learning experience, one of the pieces that comes in this, if the climate is correct in our schools, that you have an opportunity to have continuous daily interactions with individuals that are different than you. Yeah. And over the accumulation of positive, directed experiences over 12 years, that you are prepared once you reach adulthood to really kind of handle those things. I think that's the naivete of the idea, at least for public education. And what we see, when you talk about that we still have a lot of work to do, that's not necessarily the case. And it's not necessarily the case for those students who find themselves in those most marginalized groups, right? And it is, you're right. We have a lot of work to do, but the belief that if we set up learning environments, and that we present material in a way, or that we're intentional about how we do our own interactions as adults, that this next generation potentially will be there. I'm not optimistic, to be honest with you, but my own children have a unique lens. I have two kids that are biracial, and sometimes in our particular house, as much as it saddens me, I'm not really sure they benefit as much from their whiteness, if that's if that's something that they can hang their hat on. And so, but I think what they benefit from, they benefit from two supportive parents. They benefit from a critical mass of peers, and those peers' family that also appreciate and accept the differences that's our particular family. And so, as a whole, I really think that's really that piece is. I think a lot of us believe that public education, when done well, led by professionals who have a more inclusive philosophy, that we can get to this point where accepting of differences, whatever they are, is the typical standard, because that best prepares you to take on, I think, most of what you will be confronted with in adulthood.
I guess, kind of comparing what you were talking about, Tim, with the email that you got about an angry constituent that laid out why she thought a particular decision was wrong and what she would have done instead, I'm sure that actually encourages conversation and discourse. So why are we at a point, do you feel, that people think it's okay to send threatening emails rather than emails that actually promote that discourse and that conversation about a difficult topic?
To be frank, we're not alone in Eau Claire. I recently did an interview with WPR, and the reporter there, was careful to mention that, of course, the death threat itself, or the threat of mass shooting at a school board meeting, stands out in Wisconsin. But these are things that are going on in other districts across the nation, here in Wisconsin and here in Eau Claire. We're not alone in this. And I think it is part right now of a national ongoing attempt to tear at the fabric of public schools, to resist that acceptance of differences as we work toward, ultimately, I think, the justice of caring for individuals as individuals, being able to recognize but accept and celebrate our differences as part of who we are. And so I think there's just sort of, in my view, and I'm interested to hear what each of you have to say about it, it is part of a, sort of an ongoing and in some ways, and definitely organized effort by people around the country, as well as around the state, as well as here in Eau Claire, participating in that organization, designed to sort of get people riled up, get people working through fear, get people working through anger, rather than participating in a democratic society. That control through fear, that control through anger is the only, it feels like the tool that they feel like they're justified in using because I'm not sure why, but it is ongoing, and we're not alone in this, we know that, but it's important also to recognize we're not apart from it either. It is happening here. It is not just something that happens in Texas or Virginia or Florida or Minnesota or Chicago. It's also right here in Wisconsin. It is an organized attempt to bring fear and anger and to divide us through that, rather than allowing us to talk and have those hard conversations and ultimately use the process of a democratic society to solve our problems. This is an attempt to solve those problems through, intimidation and fear. Maybe you all see it in a somewhat different way.
I can't add too much to it, but I think that it's hard not to look at the current climate of schools across the nation without looking at them through COVID and looking at through what we've been through the last couple of years. And I think that hard decisions were made in every school district across the country. Decisions were made on numerous topics related to health and safety protocols, where kids are going to be learning virtually, where they can be learning in person, where they're going to be learning in a hybrid model, what were the teachers going to be required to do, what were the class sizes going to look like, how were those classes going to be structured, were electives going to be available. And I think that all of those decisions were black and white. There was one side and there was another. And there was no way to even balance the quarter on the side. You were going to flip that coin and it was going to land on one side or another. And no matter how it landed, there was going to be a significant portion of the population who felt perhaps like they were let down, like their views, their personal views did not line up with the view of their public school district. And I think that rather than recognize that these are hard decisions and they are the result of an unprecedented challenge, instead of accepting those outcomes, that anger, that break in trust between what my personal view is and what the decision was of my local school district, that eroded trust. And when that happens, when trust is eroded, I think it's really hard to get it back. And I think it's really hard for some people to come back to a rational form of discourse and a rational form of conversation. It just becomes, I'm angry, you let me down, you hurt me, and now I'm gonna make you hurt the same way. And that comes out in blowing things out of proportion, that comes out in completely irrational emails, in irrational threats, in irrational discourse. And I think that we have experienced many versions of those things here. But I don't think, again, as Tim said, I don't think we're alone in that. I think that is something that the nation is struggling with. And I think the important thing, the thing that I would encourage all of us to do, is to remember how much we love and value public schools and how incredibly important they are, and how every single person involved in nobody is involved in public schools who isn't like one of those good feely type of people. You know what I mean? They're in it for really great reasons. They choose a job that is thankless and doesn't pay very well, just be perfectly honest, we all chose that for ourselves at one point. But like we did that because we really wanted to be teachers. We wanted to contribute to the world. And I think that our community needs to remember that they can trust their teachers, they can trust their schools, they can trust that the district has their families back, that this is not, that just because a decision was made 2 years ago that you didn't agree with, that hurt your family for whatever reason, in a small or significant way, that's not the be-all end-all of what public education is. And I think that I've used the word reinvest a few times in this conversation because I think that it's really important right now, coming out of the pandemic. How do we recover? Everyone's going to ask us that. Well, we're going to be recovering from this for a decade academically, right? Like this was a significant impact on our children. But how do we recover as a community? We have to reinvest in our community, in our schools. As parents, as community members, we need to reinvest in our kids and with our hearts in trusting our public education system to be the best that it can be. You know, I think we do that. We're doing that in other parts of our. I've been into the Pablo Center more times now than I can count in the last few months, and it was just great to see those rooms packed and people are buying tickets and they're buying drinks and they're buying food and they're, like people are going back out and they're going to events and they're buying tickets and, like you're reinvesting in our community because you want it to come back and you want it to be strong and you want to believe in it. And I think that that's what we need right now. And, the origin of it, I don't think there's a single origin to where we're at right now, because certainly what Dr. Johnson is experiencing is centuries old. But the current climate of schools, I think, probably has a significant origin within the pandemic.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I guess for me, it really comes down to, as I've had an opportunity to speak with community members who don't share my perspectives or my values in the community. I am willing to listen to anyone in public discourse if the decorum and the dispositions are appropriate. And as I've told some people who insist on yelling, I only have to tolerate being yelled at by one person, but even my wife knows that after about 15 to 20 minutes, I'm probably grabbing a beer and I'm probably going to watch TV. And so beyond being yelled at by my wife, I'm not going to be yelled at by anyone. And so I would encourage those individuals who are in complete opposition to come be able to make your argument in your case without the theatrics of the anger and just the level of rudeness, and really kind of lay out your grievances. I think Tim eloquently said that, an individual was there to be able to lay out their grievances. I'm pretty sure the octave probably changed, probably not to the point of yelling, but allowing, and no one's against, I think all of us as humans want those opportunities to be able to let our grievances out and let them at least be heard. And, from my interactions with these two and other, we're willing to hear anyone. I'm just unwilling to actually be yelled at. So.
And I think sometimes it's hard for people when they tell you how passionate they are, when they tell you this is the way that they want, and when a decision then goes against the way that they want. Sometimes the reaction is, and I reflect back earlier, you brought up your wife earlier in my marriage. My wife would ask me my opinion on something, and sometimes I would say, well, I told you what I thought you should do, and then you did the opposite thing. Why did you even ask me? And of course, she, who is much wiser than me and has been at every age and all through our, she would say, of course, I listened to you, but ultimately I made a different decision. And I've had to grow in our marriage, thank goodness, and realize that, it doesn't mean that I was not heard. And that's hard sometimes when I want something to go my way, or when somebody wants something to go. And I think, Erica, you brought up, sort of the pandemic. Obviously, there was no decision that anyone could make across the country that was going to satisfy everybody, because we had such a wide array. And I struggle sometimes when people tell me, well, you did not listen to what we wanted. And I don't know how to explain. We did listen. We read every email. We check every article that looks like it's not just a random string of letters that might be, phishing. We dig in, and we do all of that work. And ultimately, we did not decide in your favor. But I don't know how to make clear how much we did listen. But that doesn't mean that we did what you wanted. Mm-hmm. And so as we are willing to listen, we are willing to have that. That is part of the responsibility of a public official, is to hear those grievances, to hear that. And ultimately then we are tasked with by the community, I think, to make the decisions the best that we can for the best of the community. And so my message to people would be, we are listening. We can't always decide to do it the way that you want us to do it for many reasons. But we are listening, and we do take it seriously. But then, we're not here to be yelled at. We're not going to be threatened. We're not going to tolerate, bigotry. We're not going to tolerate hate speech. We're not going to tolerate shouting. Mm-hmm. But that listening is something that it is, of course, important to us. That's part of why we get into it too, to listen to our community and try to help represent them.
And to add to that, I think it's also important that I think a lot of us in our lens of rendering decisions, and for me it's also a personal thing, is how I serve others is how can the majority be served in a positive way, and in that majority that majority is as inclusive as possible. And as someone from the BIPOC community, by default, so some of those, some of the personal attacks that I get, well, you have a vested interest in ensuring that actually marginalized groups are represented. Yeah, I do.
All have that. So, we should all have that invested interest. We do. We should.
Yeah. So for me, it's when you render a decision, does that decision align or make a best fit with the majority? And is that majority? Are we intentionally in our majority including the most marginalized? And because that's where, I know it's kind of like a controversial word, but that's where actually things become systemic. When you say that you made a vote for the majority, but that majority also does not actually include those individuals who have been marginalized over time. And it's I think it's a little bit more easy to do in communities like Eau Claire that are not as diverse as other areas. And so that's why we have to be, I think, a little bit more intentional in our particular approach. Now, I know there are some individuals who do not actually share in that particular view, but for me, when you make these decisions, how does it impact the majority? And within that majority, is it an inclusive majority that also includes those groups that are typically always marginalized?
So all these radical ideas that we've discussed so far are garnering some national attention. So could you talk a little bit about the national attention that you've received for these very level-headed conversations that we've had thus far?
Sure. I don't know. I assume in this sense you mean radical in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles way, that
air quotes.
Yeah, that educating every student, that including a majority of voices that is representative of all voices, that those are positive things. And but they have now been, and again, I think this is organized and this is purposeful in order to once again try to make the community angry and afraid of the people within it, of the children themselves that are within our schools, and of your neighbors and one another. But it has been purposefully amplified to that national stage, and it does, then filter back and make our community, who should be the ones really caring about our schools, a focal point in a negative way and in a way that nobody here deserves. To
What was
separate
something
out.
that Eau Claire was called?
We were recently called the single worst district in violating parents' rights in the nation. I'm not even happy to say it here because it does contain that purposeful mislead of what our district does, of how even just a plain reading of our policies, and then even a minute's notice of how we enact those things. I think, Marquel, earlier, before we began, you were saying, even these things, they're not part of our curriculum. They're part of trainings that happen for many professionals across the country, and it is that purposeful misconstruing of what is happening, of taking things out of context, of putting an interpretation on it that separates out our mission to work and create a space that's for every single student, every single child in our schools, and to make it into something that it is not, somehow pitting parents and teachers. Again, it's that intentional work to separate us by fear and anger in order to try to control our public institutions, not through democracy, not through discussion, not through the mechanisms that already exist to lead our school district. We're in an election right now. That is the mechanism by which the community can evaluate the performance of our schools and of our school board, but instead to rule it by fear and intimidation.
Yeah, but I think that national thing, though, that national attention, that can undermine and control in a big way the democratic process.
Totally.
And
right.
that concerns me in, I think, probably more than just about anything, is that, I'm from a small town, and for very, very, I would call it a very purple community in a very red state. But, how I grew up seeing local government was these were your neighbors. You talked to them. When you had a problem, you didn't go and yell at people. You didn't threaten people. You went and you talked to somebody, and you had a dialogue and a conversation. And at the end of the day, you knew that they were caring for you because their care for you was your care for them, right? That's reciprocal. That's community. And nobody in these national puppet controlling, spaces, and I don't know, media or wherever they're coming from, social media, none of those people know us. None of those people know our teachers. None of those people know our kids. They're not our neighbors. They are not our friends. They have an interest in an outcome of an election in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And whatever that right there should tell you everything, and I think that I think that if there's one thing about the national attention, it is that it is a distraction from what actual democracy and what actual public education in a public institution should be all about, which is us having conversations with one another and us working together to solve those problems in a collaborative way.
That's right.
And that is how we should solve this problem. And that is how we should move forward from here. And I think that the national attention is damaging. And it can be very, very damaging to how Eau Claire as a community keeps control over its beloved systems, and I'm offended by it. I think it has no place here.
That includes how we talk about our differences as well,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to disagree
Absolutely.
passionately that's part of the
You and I
public
disagree
process.
passionately.
Of course we have.
A time or two.
Of course we have.
Yes.
We don't need to get into it in a
No.
recorded session. But that is part of the process as well. That is, the public schools are the public of Eau Claire coming together and having those conversations and having those difficult conversations and ultimately helping to move the whole system forward together. And you're absolutely right that the national media then distracts from that and takes away from our ability to do that, whether or not, one side or the other are able to just even talk and to work towards hammering out that some common ground, or at least figure out this is a direction that we have to move together.
Yeah, and I think one of a really good example of that is the national attention has sort of exasperated or brought in this exacerbated.
Yeah.
I did that on a podcast. Anyway,
We'll keep it in. Justin will keep it.
okay, exacerbated. I think, or drawn attention to, perhaps some of the racial issues that Marquel brought up, and I think that one of the things that it did for me personally, and I'm just going to say, to find the silver lining. Your wife would be glad I asked for that. But to find the silver lining in it all was that, here is this very hateful, and it was, I think, the hardest thing I have had to read as a school board member. Maybe one of the hardest, top five hardest things I've had to read as a school board member. But what it did for me was I immediately started to think about all of the individuals, the people of color in our community who continue to serve our community, who continue to serve their neighbors, the people who show up for them, who continue to do that work in the face of that. And how it made me appreciate our community more, and the leaders who are willing to step up. But then also, okay, so it's harder. You get nastier emails. You get perhaps targeted more for certain conversations. And those are adults. Yeah. Those are adults. So what's happening to our kids? What's happening to members of our community that don't have that type of thick skin or haven't put themselves willingly into leadership positions where they're willing to take that extra, right? And so that's just another example of how as a community, we need to be looking at this type of stuff and having conversations about it. It's really how we're going to move forward. And instead of having conversations about it, we're just getting angry. And everyone's just screaming from, and now they're screaming from Michigan and Indiana and Virginia, Arizona, Florida,
California.
Austin.
Yeah. It's interesting as I was listening to my two other interviewees here. I really, you kind of feel kind of good because kind of what you guys are talking about, what you all are talking about. I feel like, wow, that's a utopian idea how things are supposed to be. But the reality is of kind of where bringing things to the national forefront is. It is the expectation, and it may not be for me in this re-election bid, but my expectation, I would hope that the national attention also galvanizes, hopefully, a majority of individuals in this community that actually share in the utopian idea that my two colleagues just spoke about. Yeah. Because for the individuals, especially in marginalized groups who haven't found that voice or don't have that voice, that continually feel unsupported, but continue to do the things they need to do to live their best version of themselves. One of the statements that could actually be made is that our Eau Claire community, undeterred by the visceral nastiness of national and local attention, that we, as a community, or a majority of in this community, say, you know what, we're not going to settle, we're not going to give into that. So that's what I really hope, and for as a member of the BIPOC community, like I said, professionally, I've done enough. I think that my body of work kind of speaks for itself. Now, whether that body of work continues in terms of civic responsibility, civic duty on a school board, we'll see. However, I would hope that this national attention also just galvanizes a majority in our community to say, you know what, Eau Claire is better than this, but what Eau Claire envisions itself to be, and what Eau Claire has at least put in front of outsiders as we continue to be, what did I just read yesterday in the report that came out? We have seen the largest increase in population and growth trajectory to our city. There's a reason. So at least our city, from the outside, we're selling ourselves a certain way. Now the challenge, in reality, is, are we the way that we're selling ourselves to be to everyone else? And to me, I'm hoping we can live up to what we're selling. Because if not, what my two colleagues described about like what this community and what it should be and what should it be about, I know I can go to a lot of BIPOC families who have been here their entire life. Especially some of the friends that I have from the Hmong community, Hmong American. They would actually give you a different version of Eau Claire. And it's our hopes that someday that we're there. Probably will not happen during my time that's in Eau Claire, and I will be honest with you, I will not be a lifer in Eau Claire, because you can't actually golf here 12 year round. So I will
His
eventually.
priorities are education, golf.
Yeah, pretty much.
You can disc golf here in the winter.
Oh man, never mind. We're not
So
even.
you can get in on my house.
Yeah,
Or we can just invent a new sport. We're good at that too.
We're not even going there. I can't. But I think what they described, and I would hope that the listeners really what Tim and Erica described. That's a huge community. And the other thing is, as we're continuing to sell this place, we talk about, Erica used that terminology, reinvestment. If we're trying to actually, the new workforce will look completely different than the current workforce.
Yep.
And that new workforce is a diverse workforce. That's also, that new workforce will be coming actually with children, where the traditional idea of the family dynamics are more contemporary. And contemporary family dynamics look completely different. And we're going beyond multi-generational households, same-sex households, single-parent households, And so it's kind of one of those things where we have to fit all those dynamics, biracial families, and so we have to do what we need to do to be attractive to those and ensure that those kids in the public schools have a great experience.
And I think that's the easy call that's the call to action for Eau Claire right now. In the face of what we're seeing, in the face of this national attention, I'm not 100% sure where every one of the cameras are, so I can't look directly into it, because, kind of call out, oh, they're right over here. Yeah. This is going to be weird, But we have to, as a community, recognize what is happening in Eau Claire, how the national impacts and the national attempts to try to distract us from doing what we need to do. We may not achieve that utopia, right? Utopia is not achievable. But we need to say that is our goal. And we need to, as a community, forcefully reject those tactics. We need to put aside our differences and say, if you bring those tactics to our community, we will reject them. We need to reject them in our day-to-day lives. But we also need to reject them at the ballot box, because that is the mechanism by which we can say, this is not Eau Claire. This is not who we will be. And when you come to Eau Claire, you can know that this community is here for you. It's going to be real weird, all these cuts. I just recognize I'm looking at all the different cameras, but I mean, that's the call to action. We have to do this not only like as individuals in our day-to-day lives, but we have to do it at the ballot box as well, because that's how we send a message that these tactics are not acceptable in our community and they won't work to gain power. We will be there. We have to do it.
Right, but that it's not, and that it's not like the thing that I will say is it's not an angry rejection, because again, like,
No.
you can't
Powerful.
meet, right, you can't meet that type of, some of the discourse has been quite awful. And it has been hard as an individual, as a person in the community, to not be pulled into it myself, right? To Will Smith it. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and meet that.
Oh yeah.
Putting a timestamp on this.
I'm gonna meet fire with fire, you know what I mean?
That's way too early.
Well, what else did he do?
Oh, wow, way too early
well,
just to bring that in there. Okay,
sorry.
but okay, no,
But
that's
anyway,
good, yeah.
but like, where you get so mad that you just smack back, right? And that's not like that. When we say, like, we show up and we say that this is a message, we have to say no to this discourse, but we have to say yes to a different discourse. And when I say reinvestment, that's, that, and that's on all of us.
Right.
That's on all of us to do better. That's on me to do better. That's on all of us. And as an individual, as a parent, and as a public official, to do better. How do we improve the discourse? How do we learn from whatever this mess is that's happening over here and improve our discourse so that this doesn't continue to happen, so that people feel heard, so that education becomes not just people trying to indoctrinate, which I think that can end up happening, is where you end up getting a whole bunch of people with a certain level of ideas and education becomes indoctrination instead of education. Yeah. They're two different things, and sometimes they can get conflated in the public sphere. So how do we continue to move education forward and stop with the control mechanisms and stop with the rash ideas and the grabbing at things and just trust one another to move this forward together. So I think that it's a reinvestment in a discourse. It's not like a violent, no to you and your bad ideas. It's more of a, hey, that's not where we're going right now. And let's come back together and let's figure this out together. And, I hope that we can do that. I hope that it's not just this constant us versus them thing all the time, because that just feels, that's not healthy and it's not right.
Yeah, I think that the reinvestment, if we're throwing out I think also, but redefine. I think one of the things that I've also encountered with community members talking about it is all of us reflect and hearken back to our own educational experiences. Mm. However, those of us who have done additional training and preparation in education, contemporary education is a lot different than our own experiences. And I think what the challenge that I run into with talking about community members, when there's like, Eau Claire School District, it was this, shiny, vibrant thing in like 72. You know what? Eau Claire School District can also still be the shiny, bright thing in 2022, right. But the education and how it's defined looks a lot different, because the dynamics of actually our students change year to year. The dynamics and preparation and training of the teachers that we have for our students changes every year. And being a parent, all of us here are parents, the dynamics of parenting have changed and shifted for those times. So as we reinvest, I think we probably have to do a better job of redefining what the educational experience is in 2022. And, you know, it does really go beyond teaching math, science, providing art and physical education. School districts play an integral part. I think if all of us, if we were self-reflective, the school experience plays an integral part in shaping our social and emotional development. And how that manifests itself throughout the years via interactions, that has dramatically changed. With the advent of social media and other technologies, all of it has changed. And so reinvest, but also redefine what the educational experience means in 2022, you know, because we have to prepare young people to interact in a society that looked very different than at least any of us that are sitting in this room thought, and especially looked very different than any of our parents. And so that's really that other piece that has to be added.
Well, we're just about out of time for tonight, but I really want to thank you all for what you're doing on the school board and for coming to have this conversation tonight. I don't think that any community member, regardless of their status as a public figure, should have to endure the types of verbal, nonverbal, electronic communications that you've received over the last couple of weeks. I think it's disheartening to know that it's happening in our community. And I would really hope that our listeners to this episode recognize that and, like you said, rebuff it with a vote at the ballot box rather than an angry email.
Yeah, it's not an angry rejection.
Yeah.
But it is a forceful rejection that we need.
Yep. So if you are not registered to vote, make sure that you register to vote. The election is Tuesday, April 5th. myvotewi.gov is a good place to register and check your polling places. Here in Eau Claire, they have changed. So make sure that you know where your polling place is. If you can vote early, vote early. Make sure that you have your voice heard in this upcoming election because it's important. It's bigger than our national politics, honestly, because our national politics and the national spotlight that's on it, it's just a distraction from what you're actually doing on the school board.
I just want to point out, as you give a plug for voting, I do think it might be too late to register online for this election, but you can register at the ballot box on election day. So you can just go bring your ID and they will help you get registered at the ballot box. So it may be too late to register online, but myvote.wi.gov, you can find where your polling place is and they will register you right there if you are not registered.
And if you're not registered, just make sure that you bring something that verifies your address. That can be a utility bill, a bank statement, a credit card bill, something like that that verifies that you live where you say that you live and your photo ID, if the addresses are different on those. Great. So with that, thank you all again, and thank you for joining us for Conversations in Color.